Hey, my name is Dr. Brendan McCarthy. I am the Chief Medical Officer of Protea Medical Center in Chandler, Arizona. Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. I really appreciate you coming by. As always, with every one of these podcasts, I want you to know that I spend a lot of time researching and preparing for these because I love doing it and I'm really passionate about it. At every one of these podcasts, I cite my research. I want you to know that I don't come at this trying to just spout things that I think are true. I spout things that I've used clinically. I speak about the things that I have seen in the literature. And so I speak from experience, not just from opinion and conjecture. It's not something I make up as I go along. When I cite the research, it gives you, the consumer, you, the patient, the opportunity to look at these things and to understand them at a deeper level. Not all of you will, but I want you to know all of you have that ability. And when I practice medicine, I believe it's so important for me as the physician to do everything in my power to fully educate the patient to understand what it is that we're going to do together. I want them to understand what's going on, what I'm seeing, what I'm looking for. When they look at the lab review with me, let's step back for a second. Think about this as a human being. You're walking into your doctor's office and they're going to sit down and go over your labs with you. And that is a really vulnerable place to be in as a human being. That's the moment where the doctor may end up having to tell you have cancer. That's the moment your doctor may end up having to tell you that there's something serious in your health. There's something that needs to be addressed immediately. And it is so vulnerable. And as the physician, my job is to make sure that I communicate clearly and that I'm respectful of that vulnerability and that I use facts. I've said this in previous podcasts, but I don't want to really circle back to it because I feel strongly about it. When you're in that chair as the patient being vulnerable, it's easy for people to take advantage of that. It's easy for someone, when you're sick, you're vulnerable, you're insecure, you're not sure what's happening in your health. It's easy for someone to say, wow, this person, what won't they pay to be well? And they can do a lot of different things, and I've seen that. I've seen unethical behavior in medicine before. The best ways of treating medicine, period, is clear communication, education, and to be transparent as humanly possible with my patients. So when I tell them this lab value is here, I'm concerned. This is why I'm concerned. Here's the textbook. Here's the research. Here's the standards of care that have been established. And I will explain it to them until they understand it. Because understanding is everything. With that said, it's like that's a lot of chat to bring into a starting of a podcast, but it's because this is a really good thing to talk about clarity around, and it's estrogen. Estrogen is not a crime, okay? Estrogen is not a crime, and it's treated like it is. I actually, the presentation, I titled it, Estrogen is not a crime. It's because so many women have been so conditioned through media to view their estrogen through a really bad lens. Women think of estrogen in terms of breast cancer. They think of estrogen in terms of ovarian cancer. They think of estrogen in terms of weight gain, anxiety, depression. They see it through that lens easily because that's what's out there. There's a lot of articles, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of clickbait out there that prey upon our fears. And estrogen has been demonized. The thing is, the question we should be asking then is as scientists, on my role, is that deserved? Is that reputation deserved? Does it deserve to be vilified like this? The answer is no. I'm letting you know that straight off the top. It doesn't. It doesn't need to be vilified. If you think about it, estrogen has been essential for humanity since we started. If estrogen was awful, how did we get this far? How did we get this far as a species if estrogen was so awful? Why is it in the past 50 years that estrogen-related pathology has been jumping up? Well, is it estrogen is the problem? That's the question we should be asking. Why wasn't it a problem prior to that? Why is it just now? One of the reasons why it seems that we're behind in understanding estrogen in women and why there's so much confusion about estrogen in women. Part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is media. And media just taking things and running with it. Because when you put fear into something, you're going to get eyes on it. And you get eyes on it, you're going to get clicks, and you get clicks, you're going to get, advertising. That's how that works. We all know this. The real reason why estrogen has been vilified and why the media is able to pick it up and turn it into a bad actor is because there has been so little research done in women for so long. Our understanding of hormones in women is so poor. It's so sad. Before 1993, there was no research being done on women in endocrinology, period. None. It was not funded. And there was a big change that occurred in 1993, and they made those changes. But even then, we're still not funding it very well. We are not researching into women nearly as much as we should. And the research, as I mentioned, is shoddy at best. One such example using estrogen is they did a study, the Women's Health Initiative, and they did this study and they called horse urine derived estrogen, horse estrogen. They called that estrogen. Now, it's horse estrogen, not human estrogen. So it's a very different molecular structure, but it has estrogen-like effects in the horse, but it's endogenous to the horse. They took that estrogen and they gave it to women. And in the studies, they said, we're giving these women estrogen. It's not estrogen that's naturally occurring in women. So there's a bit of confusion there in their communication. And if you think of science, that's pathetic. That's really is pathetic. We should never make that mistake, but they did. So they called horse urine derived estrogen for women. They mislabeled it. They termed it that way. So it was confusing. They also called something that's a synthetic variation of progesterone that has progesterone-like effects in a human body. And when I say progesterone-like effects, it's not progesterone, okay? But it has a similar effect on the body. They called that progesterone. And they did this study in the Women's Health Initiative using a horse urine-based estrogen and a synthetic progesterone, and it ended up causing cancer risks to shoot through the roof, among other things. And the news took it as estrogen is awful. Estrogen causes cancer. And the damage was done in the media. We're all afraid of dying of cancer. We all have those healthy fears in us. And so they just took it and ran with it. And they didn't realize by doing that, by taking it and running with it, you have caused so much confusion and you're going to have a negative impact on women's health overall. Women now look at a part of their biology with fear. It's your body. This is a tremendous disservice to you. Estrogen, in my opinion, in my experience medically, is a good thing. It is a good thing. You're supposed to have it. I'm supposed to have it. You're supposed to have it. We're all supposed to have it. But we're supposed to have the kind specific to humans. Okay? Why is it good? Brendan, why is it good? Good question. What does estrogen do that's so good in men and women? In men and women, it plays a role with bone density. We get bone density from it, which is great. It plays a role with HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol. It plays a role with learning, mental focus. It plays a role with emotions, which I'm going to delve into a lot today in this episode. It builds collagen. In women, breast development and breast health, definitely with estrogen, and also with urinary tract and all the aspects associated with reproduction. Estrogen is critical for that developmental, the first half of the phase, first half of the cycle to develop the body in preparation for becoming pregnant. So estrogen is important and it is good. It has a lot of good it does for us. The thing about estrogen is that it's tricky. As with all things, you need to have it, but it needs to be in balance. If you give someone too much of a good thing, it stops being a good thing. If you give people too little of an important thing, it's not going to be doing its job either. It all needs to be in balance. If you like bananas are delicious. Bananas are good. Bananas are full of potassium. If I ate 100 bananas, that wouldn't be so good for me because it's too much. If I ate no bananas, it's not enough. That's a horrible example. Where did I come up with? I don't know where bananas came from. I was watching Minions with my kids the other day. Sorry, bananas. But you get the idea. The bad reputation of estradiol, if it was given to you by some dude in a white coat saying estradiol is terrible, it would be pretty bad. Like, let me back up. Let's hear me here. If the Women's Health Initiative had come out and said estradiol is the worst thing in the world, it's going to kill you, you got to stop it. If it was just them saying it randomly, a lot of us would look at it and be like, maybe. We'd be kind of questioning it. What made estrogen get its bad reputation the rest of the way has been your experience with estrogen. The experience of estrogen with women is a big part of why we look at it from that bad lens. And you think about it. Estrogen dominance in women, you feel it. You know it. You know what estrogen dominance feels like. You know when estrogen is high, you're going to have that breast distension. Some of you feel that as breast pain. Some of you are going to have menorrhagia, heavy periods. Some of you are going to have cramping. Some of your moods are not going to be right. You don't feel right. So having that guy in a lab coat say estrogen's bad is there, but then your physical experience of it being dominant is bad, and that kind of compounds it. And that pushes us into this binary view we have of estrogen being good and bad. It's bad, so it's binary. It's like, those are terrible. But the body doesn't work in a binary fashion. There's no good and bad in the body. It's just balance or not balanced. Estrogen can't be viewed through the lens of being good and bad because it isn't good or bad. It's a part of you. Estrogen needs to be viewed through the lens of, is it in balance for your body? Is it where it's supposed to be for health? That's what's important, because you have to have it. It's a part of who you are. You'll always have it. It's part of us. The balance that I'm talking about that happens in a woman's body is interesting because it's too much is bad, too little is bad. And that's going to be something modulated on something called the estrogen receptors. Now, prior to, I think it was hold on, let me go this over really quick. Prior to 1996, we only understood the estrogen receptor A. And estrogen receptor A was the one that the estrogen binds to the receptor. Here's the cell. There's receptor A. Estrogen binds onto it, and then it's going to trigger the cell to become active. And that's where you see the improved physiology, breast tissue, lining the uterus. It's all the feminizing thing it does, but also, collagen production, HDL cholesterol, bone density, et cetera, et cetera. So it does all the good work it's supposed to do. That's estrogen receptor alpha. And the thing about it, though, when you stimulate estrogen receptor alpha to a certain degree, you're good. A little too much, it triggers brain chemistry. It moves the brain chemistry towards anxiety. It fools around with your GABA receptors, and it triggers your brain to move to anxiety when you have too much. So estrogen receptor alpha does trigger anxiety in women when it's set a certain level of saturation. Okay, and when we did that, we thought, that's the proof that estrogen's the cause of anxiety. Estrogen is a bad thing. And then, as I mentioned, in 1996, we learned about what estrogen receptor beta is. And estrogen receptor beta is a whole other thing. The understanding of estrogen receptor beta turned our understanding of estrogen on its head. And that's important. I still, to this day, make the mistake of putting estrogen in the binary category, being like, well, you have estrogen, I need to balance it out with progesterone. It makes estrogen seem like the bad guy. And I know I make that mistake. I'm still, to this day, and me, I do this for a living. This is my soul. This is the meaning of my life. I still make that mistake. Estrogen receptor beta, when you have adequate levels of estrogen receptor beta mitigates anxiety. It reduces anxiety. This is the sweet spot of estrogen. When estrogen's at the right level, your anxiety levels drop. So estrogen, when it's too high anxiety, too low anxiety, right in the middle, estrogen receptor beta shines. And that's when you have less anxiety with your patients. When I work with estrogen, when I work with a woman with anxiety, as I mentioned a second ago, it's easy for me to fall into that binary pattern of like estrogen is the one that causes the anxiety and progesterone is going to be our savior. And it's just not correct. There's more to it. And that estrogen receptor beta is really the key part of that equation. So estrogen, when it's normalized, we see less anxiety. And it's not like I need to use progesterone to reverse the damage of estrogen causing anxiety. It's more like I need estrogen to be at the right level to reduce anxiety, and I have progesterone in its right level to reduce anxiety. They play their role together. It's not like I'm using progesterone to shut down estrogen's activity in the body. You know what I mean? So when it comes to estrogen, there will be people who don't want it. There are people who have severe hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness. They're going through menopause. They're losing bone density. And they say, I don't want any estrogen in my body. I don't want those mood changes. I don't want this to happen to me. Or I think this is a bad thing. I think estrogen has a bad reputation. And that's because we have that wrong view of it. And it's like we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We need to return now to look to it and say, all right, estrogen receptor beta is an important part of us. And when you have estrogen at the right level, the beta receptor is going to be saturated and you're going to have better mood. Above that's not good, below that's not good. Right in the middle is where it should be. And it's important as the physician to make sure we keep that in balance in running lab work. My preferred level for women when I'm treating them is around 82 for the estrogen level, the estradiol level. In those cases, I use estradiol as the fraction that I look at, because that's the one that does the most work. Estrone is an inflammatory type of estrogen that's not biologically active, and we don't use that. And estriol is the one that is most common in pregnancy. But estradiol is the one we look at. And we went that around 82 in our labs, and that's a good level to be at, of course, with progesterone. How can I modulate? What if a person has estrogen that's a little too high, and their estrogen receptor alpha is being triggered more than estrogen receptor beta? How can I help reduce or modulate that? What can I do? What's my first step? The first thing is to make sure that the patient is cycling normal and they're not having too much estrogen because they're not ovulating. You want to make sure they're ovulating. You want to do all those benefits to them. But still, some women will make too much estrogen even when they're ovulating, making progesterone. How do we modulate it? Estrogen receptor alpha can be modulated by using something called diindolylmethane, DIM. Diindolylmethane is a compound that's derived from broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. You can buy it as a supplement. 200 milligrams once to twice a day, that should do it. And that binds that receptor, and that helps modulate that receptor. And that's very helpful. And I've used that clinically for years. The thing, though, is, and I go into other modulators, there's other things we can modulate the receptors with, and there's a lot of research out there regarding them. But more important than that is going back to, it's important, as I mentioned earlier, to do our best to get the patient's estrogen levels within the normal range. So if the woman is not ovulating, it's our goal to get them to ovulate so that way their estrogen levels can drop down and they can make progesterone instead. So we can still modulate the receptors. We can still have benefit to the estrogen. So estrogen, it has that reputation because of misunderstanding, because of poor research, because medicine still has a large misogynistic bent on it. And that happened along with women's experiences of estrogen dominance causing symptoms that really are not comfortable. And they came together to give estrogen this reputation that it doesn't quite deserve. I want you to please look to estrogen through a better lens. Consider it as a part of your biology that's important, but it's important that we keep it in a healthy range. I hope this is helpful. I look at your reviews. I read you, mostly on Instagram. I'm not going to lie to you. I read Instagram a lot faster than I do all the other ones. For some reason, that's much easier for me to grab in the middle of the day at work and read. I read your comments. They matter to me. Your questions are important. And some of your questions, I do make videos specific to those. So please keep up the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good day.